Before you dive into Ethan's emotional journey, make sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Emma's Green Eyes, A Second Chance, Part 1. He said, "She is better than you." 3 years later, he saw the girl with his eyes. The world stopped. The cold exit. He didn't mean for it to come out the way it did. It wasn't planned, thought out, or even rooted in truth. But sometimes, words spoken out of fear or pride fall with the sharpest edge. Ethan Thorne stood by his penthouse office windows, the city lights sprawling endlessly behind him, like a kingdom he believed he controlled. Everything about him looked composed. Dark hair perfectly combed, posture straight, expression unreadable. He had trained himself to look unbreakable. But the moment those 4 words left his mouth, something trembled deep inside. Something small, buried, and terrified. "She is better than you," he said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even look at her when he said it. It was uttered almost softly, as if the gentleness could make the cruelty more palatable. But the stillness of the words made them hurt the most. Clara Jensen felt the world tilt for a moment. Her fingers tightened around the small cardboard box she held. Inside were the last pieces of the life she had shared with him. A sweater from a weekend trip upstate. A book he always read before bed. A framed photo where they laughed at something silly no one else would understand. She hadn't come to fight. She hadn't even come to beg him to change his mind. She had come to leave with dignity. But the phrase was a bruise that wouldn't fade quickly. She raised her eyes to him. Not with anger, not with despair, only with a quiet understanding. There had always been something tender in her gaze, something that made people feel seen. Yet now, it felt like looking at him through a closing door. "I hope she makes you happy," Clara said, and her voice didn't break. She wouldn't allow it. Ethan still didn't turn to her. His jaw clenched, but his expression remained the same. He kept pretending this decision had been logical, necessary, inevitable. But something in the stillness of the room suggested he was holding back too much, as if any movement might cause the mask to crack. Clara didn't slam the door. She didn't throw the box. She didn't beg. She simply walked out. The sound of her steps on the polished floor echoed louder than it should, as if the room itself didn't want to let her go. When the door closed behind her, silence filled the space like smoke. Ethan finally exhaled. He turned then, slowly, toward the door she had exited, but she was already gone. The city lights outside flickered like a heartbeat, reminding him that everything continued, even when something inside him didn't. Downstairs, Clara walked out into the winter night. The wind was sharp, biting her skin, but she didn't clutch her coat tighter. She didn't feel cold. Her mind was elsewhere. There was already a small life growing inside her, though she hadn't told him yet. She had wanted to wait for the right moment, to tell him gently, to tell him honestly, to tell him with love. But now that future no longer existed. She walked toward the street, holding the small box to her chest, and whispered to the life inside her. "It's just us, now." She didn't cry. She wouldn't allow it. Not yet. Crying was something she would do later, alone, where no one could see. Not because she was ashamed, but because the grief deserved privacy. Back in the penthouse, Ethan remained motionless. The silence was suffocating. He felt as if something vital had been removed from the room, leaving it too large, too empty, too quiet. And though he had chosen this, though he believed this was the safer path, something in him understood he had just made a mistake that would resonate far deeper than any business deal or public decision. But he wouldn't know how profound that mistake was. Not yet. He didn't know the child growing inside her would have his eyes. He didn't know that 3 years later, he would see them both again. And his world would stop. Interactive question. Do you think Ethan regretted his words in that instant? Or did his ego still dominate him? Comment your opinion, and don't miss the next part to see the impact of his decision. 2. A new beginning. The roots of strength. Clara did not leave the city in a dramatic rush. There were no slammed suitcases or midnight bus rides. She packed slowly, piece by piece, as if each item she placed in her bags was a step toward rebuilding herself. The small apartment she chose in a quieter town in Hudson Valley was not glamorous. It was older, modest, with creaking wood floors and windows that let in the golden light of the afternoon. But it was hers, and for the first time in a long time, she felt she could breathe in it. She continued working, first at a small bakery, then part-time at the library. The work was simple, but there was a stability in the routine that helped her heal. People knew her name. They asked how she was and expected real answers. There were no gala nights, no charity dinners, no evaluation of her worth based on who stood beside her. Here, she was just Clara. And that was enough. When Ava was born, it was early morning, after a long night that felt endless. Clara's hands gripped the sheets. Her body trembled with exhaustion. There was no one by her side to whisper encouragement or wipe her brow. But she didn't break. She didn't cry out at the solitude. She simply endured, because she had someone to meet. When the baby was finally placed in her arms, Clara felt the world go silent. Ava was tiny, warm, with a soft swatch of dark hair and delicate lashes that fluttered as if she were already dreaming. And when Ava opened her eyes, those unmistakable deep green eyes, Clara felt her chest clench in a way she had never experienced. Not regret, not pain, something akin to awe, something akin to wonder. She slid the tip of her finger gently across Ava's cheek and whispered, "We're going to be okay. I'll make sure we are." Those first few months were hard. Nights were long and sleepless. Ava cried often, and Clara paced the living room, holding her, humming softly even as exhaustion clouded her vision. Yet there was a strange beauty in it, the kind of beauty that only comes from being desperately needed. Ava's tiny fingers curling around hers made the world feel less broken. Mrs. Rodriguez, the elderly neighbor across the hall, became her lifeline. Some mornings she would knock softly and hand Clara a hot soup, or offer to watch Ava while Clara showered or slept. She never asked for explanations. She simply gave kindness, the kind that silently rebuilds foundations, brick by brick. The town itself became part of Ava's childhood. The grocery store owner always saved her favorite fruit snacks. The librarian let her choose books even before she could read, placing them in her lap like treasures. The barista at the corner cafe learned to make Clara's coffee exactly the way she liked it. Strong, warm, and steady. Ava grew quickly. She laughed out loud, the kind of laugh that made strangers turn their heads and smile involuntarily. She ran everywhere instead of walking. She sang to the birds, to the rain puddles, to the stuffed animals lined up in careful rows along the sofa. She liked to collect pebbles she called magic stones and kept them in small jars, as if they held secrets. Sometimes, though, she would climb onto Clara's lap with a quiet expression, rest her head on her chest, and just stay there. As if some deep instinct within her recognized that her mother carried a weight she couldn't see, but could somehow ease. Clara never spoke Ethan's name. Not to Ava, not to herself. She didn't erase him. She didn't curse him. She simply didn't allow the memory to shape the person she was becoming. Ava deserved a mother who was whole, not one bruised by the past. So Clara learned to put herself back together, slowly, tenderly, with patience and gentleness. But healing was not the same as forgetting. Some nights, when Ava was asleep, Clara would sit by the window with a cup of tea and look at the moon. She thought of the life she almost had, the love she almost kept, and the words that had ended it all. She is better than you. The pain had faded, but the memory still hovered near her sometimes, like a ghost that didn't know when to leave. Yet every time Ava stirred in her sleep, every time that little body sought her out, Clara turned away from the past and toward the present, toward the girl who carried green eyes as a reminder, but laughter as a promise. Thus passed 3 years, not dramatically, not violently, simply in the quiet unfolding of everyday life. And during those 3 years, without realizing it, Clara became strong in ways she never imagined possible. She became the kind of strong that doesn't need to shout to be heard, the kind that sets roots and refuses to break, the kind that protects love without losing herself. She didn't know that Ethan was also changing, but in a different way. And she didn't know that their worlds would collide again, not softly, not gradually, but in a single moment that would stop time and leave them both breathless. Your turn. What do you think Ethan has been doing during these 3 years? Has he found the happiness he sought? Or has the absence of Clara left a void? Share your predictions in the comments. 3. The emptiness of success. Ethan's awakening. Ethan didn't notice the change at first. When Clara left, he moved on as if nothing had happened. His world was built on speed, ambition, and the illusion of control, and he threw himself into that world with more intensity than ever before. His days were scheduled to the minute. Meetings blended into calls, calls into dinners, and dinners into silent nights spent looking out at a city that never slept. He told himself that success was the only thing that mattered. He repeated that belief until his reflection began to look like a stranger. Vivian remained by his side. Their relationship was impeccable on paper. She knew exactly how to take his arm in public, how to smile at the right moments, how to remain sweet and undemanding. She never questioned him. She never challenged him. She never asked for more than he offered. Her presence was smooth, effortless, and calm. Most people would have called her the perfect partner for a man like him, but perfection lacks warmth. Ethan didn't realize how empty the penthouse had become until the silence started to sound loud. He would come home to find the apartment pristine, immaculate, untouched. Nothing was out of place because nothing was lived. The expensive furniture was cold. The air smelled sterile. He walked through the space and heard his own footsteps echo. And sometimes he remembered another sound, soft laughter, someone humming while cooking, a voice asking, "How was your day?" He remembered the warmth of hands holding his. He remembered the quiet security of being seen. He tried to push those memories away. The mind, however, does not obey the will when the heart is involved. There were nights he would stand in the kitchen without turning on the lights, staring at the spot where Clara used to sit on the counter with her knees tucked up to her chest, smiling at him as she told him stories of her childhood. He would close his eyes and still see her there, but when he opened them, nothing, just the emptiness. Vivian noticed the change, though she never brought it up. She sensed he was distant, but chose not to get closer. Getting closer would mean risking rejection, and she feared rejection more than she desired closeness. So they existed side by side like two portraits hung on the same wall, perfectly framed, perfectly displayed, utterly disconnected. The company prospered. The world admired Ethan. Newspapers praised his leadership. Investors followed his lead. People saw a focused, powerful, unbreakable man. No one saw the exhaustion in his eyes when he thought no one was looking. No one saw the way he would linger in hallways, as if waiting for someone to be waiting for him on the other side of a door. Sometimes he would see families on the street, fathers carrying their children, laughing together, holding hands, and something inside him would clench. The emotion wasn't envy. It was something more fragile, something akin to longing, something akin to loss. He started thinking about Clara, not in bursts, not in waves, in moments. A familiar song, a woman in a cafe with dark hair, the smell of cinnamon, which she used to sprinkle on his morning coffee. These things followed him, like small reminders that the life he had chosen was not the life he had wanted. Not truly. But he didn't know how to turn back. Men like him didn't go back. They pushed forward until the road ran out. His dreams began to change too. He would dream of a small hand wrapped around his finger, a child's laughter echoing in a sunny room, a voice whispering, "Dad." He would wake up breathless, heart pounding, eyes burning, and the penthouse bedroom felt too large, too cold, too silent. He began spending less time at home. The office became a haven again. Work could drown out the thoughts, but only temporarily. Whenever the distractions faded, the ache returned. Finally, Vivian asked him once very softly, "Are you happy?" He didn't answer. She didn't ask again, and yet he believed that time would cushion everything. But time doesn't erase. It collects. 3 years passed. 3 years of joyless success. 3 years of silence where love once lived. And then, in a hotel lobby, surrounded by strangers and noise and bright artificial light, he saw Clara holding a little girl. And in that instant, everything he had buried surged to the surface and shattered him. The world didn't just stop. It broke. It rearranged itself. Because he didn't just see Clara. He saw the girl, his daughter, with his eyes. And the life he lost, no, the life he threw away, was right in front of him. Unexpected twist. Ethan finally faces the truth. How do you think Clara will react to seeing him, especially now that she has their daughter? Share your thoughts and get ready for the dramatic reunion in the next part. 4. The reunion. A halted breath. The hotel lobby was warm and loud with the hum of travelers, the clinking of glasses, the rolling of suitcases, and the polished shoes on the marble floor. It was the kind of place where everything looked expensive and nothing felt personal. Ethan walked beside Vivian, responding to something she had just said about an upcoming gala, though he wasn't really paying attention. He rarely did. She knew how to talk without expecting to be heard. His phone buzzed with emails. His assistant sent documents that needed signatures. His mind was already prepping for tomorrow's meetings. He moved through life on autopilot, aware of everything and connected to nothing. And then he saw her. It wasn't dramatic at first. It was simply a shape in his peripheral vision that made him turn his head slightly. But once he turned, the world snapped into focus in a painful, undeniable way. Clara was standing near the check-in desk, her dark hair loosely gathered over one shoulder. She held a little girl, her tiny arms wrapped around Clara's neck, her face nestled close, as if the world was only safe there. The girl looked half asleep, soft and warm and utterly trusting. Clara ran her hand across the girl's back, a gesture so gentle it felt like a memory Ethan hadn't known he remembered. He stopped. Completely. Vivian took another step before realizing he was no longer beside her. She turned, confusion crossing her perfect features, but Ethan didn't notice her. He saw nothing but the two of them. Clara felt his gaze first. She lifted her eyes slowly, as if she no longer expected anything from this world, and therefore couldn't be surprised. But when their eyes met, something flickered. Recognition. Yes, but deeper. Something akin to an old wound breathing again. Ethan's heart felt like it had forgotten how to beat, then tried to catch up all at once. His chest tightened, his breath hitched, and his vision tunneled until everything but her and the child faded away. The girl, the little one, stirred and lifted her head. Her hair was the same shade of dark brown as his. Her delicate features looked soft and familiar, but it was her eyes, those unmistakable deep green eyes that hit him with the force of something he had never prepared for. He didn't need to ask. He didn't need to think. His soul already knew. His voice abandoned him before he could decide what to say. Clara. There was no accusation in the way she looked at him, no bitterness, just history. Long, quiet, heavy history. She adjusted the girl in her arms, her movements calm and firm, as if she had learned to be her own anchor. Ava, Clara said softly, say hello. The girl blinked toward him. Her expression was open, curious, unprotected. She had no idea who he was. She only saw a stranger looking at her with eyes full of something she didn't understand. Hi, said Ava, her voice small and bright. Ethan nearly fell to his knees. The sound hit him harder than any shouted argument, any plea, any apology he had rehearsed in the quiet corners of his mind, without ever admitting it. Vivian finally stepped forward, her voice strained, uncertain. Uncertain. Ethan, who is that? But he didn't look at her. He didn't acknowledge her. She faded into background noise. His eyes were on Ava, his daughter, the daughter he had never held, never named, never protected, never loved. Not because she wasn't wanted, he realized now with painful, brutal clarity, but because he had been too afraid to allow himself to need anything real. His voice cracked when he spoke again. She's mine. Clara didn't flinch. She didn't defend herself. She didn't justify or apologize. Yes, she said simply, she is. The lobby seemed to exhale a silence around them. Conversations muffled. Footsteps softened. The world quieted into something small and intimate. Vivian backed away, not dramatically, not with tears, but with a quiet comprehension that needed no explanation. She saw something between them that she knew she never had, and never could have. Ethan took a single step toward them, but stopped as if afraid of scaring the moment away. Clara's voice was firm. She doesn't know yet. I didn't want her to grow up with something broken. He swallowed hard, tears burning his chest instead of his eyes. Clara, she shook her head. Not to silence him, to give him time. To show that apologies were not a currency she accepted easily. Ava touched his hair again, gently playing with the strands. She looked between them, sensing something large in the air without understanding it. And Ethan realized something both devastating and beautiful. He had never lost Clara in a single moment. He had lost her slowly, choice by choice, fear by fear, silence by silence. Now, he didn't know if he would get a second chance, but he knew, with absolute clarity, that if he ever did, he wouldn't waste it. Reflection question. The truth is out. Do you think Ethan is truly capable of changing and earning a place in Ava's life, or is the past too heavy? Share your thoughts and get ready for the dramatic continuation in the next part. V. The silent redemption. The road back home. He didn't sleep that night. Not a wink. The hotel room was dark, save for the faint glow of the city lights outside the window. But Ethan sat awake in a chair, elbows resting on his knees, hands tightly clasped, as if holding his own world together by force. Vivian slept in the next room, or pretended to. They hadn't spoken after returning. They hadn't needed to. The silence had said everything. What he felt now wasn't confusion. It was certainty, sharp and undeniable. Certainty of what he had done. Certainty of what he had lost. Certainty of what mattered, and what had never mattered at all. The next morning he skipped his meetings. He didn't call his assistant. He didn't think about the company, the investors, the packed schedule of obligations that once made him feel important. He drove to Clara's small town. He didn't call ahead. He didn't plan a speech. He simply drove, hands tight on the wheel, heart pounding like something finally waking up after being asleep for years. Clara was outside her apartment building when he arrived, helping Ava put on a tiny jacket with embroidered sunflowers on the sleeves. Ava's hair was pulled into 2 uneven pigtails. She looked bright, awake, and utterly untouched by the world's cruelty. Clara saw him before Ava did. She tensed, not with fear, but with caution. The kind of caution that comes from surviving something and refusing to be hurt again. Ethan approached slowly. He didn't try to force a smile. He didn't try to fake familiarity. He knelt down beside Ava, lowering himself not just physically, but emotionally, to the level of the child who looked at him with curious green eyes. "Hello," he said softly, the same way she had said it to him the night before. Ava's face lit up with recognition, not of him, not yet, but of the sound of kindness. She took a step closer, tilting her head. "Do you like pancakes?" she asked, with the seriousness of someone asking a question that determines the fate of the universe. A gasp of laughter almost escaped him. "Yes." As he said, "Yes, I do." Ava nodded solemnly, satisfied. Clara watched. She didn't intervene. She didn't soften. She didn't make this moment easier or harder. She simply observed, letting the truth unfold at its own pace. Ethan stood then, turning to her. His voice was painfully firm. "She should have known me. She should have had me. That is my fault. I don't expect forgiveness for it. I don't expect trust. But I am asking you for a chance to be here, to know her, to not lose her the way I lost you." Clara held his gaze. She didn't look away. She didn't hide the hurt in her eyes. But there was no hate there. Only memory. Only caution, only a heart that had learned to protect itself. You don't get to show up one day and take up space in her life just because you feel regret now, she said. Her voice was quiet, firm, steady. If you enter her world, she will love you. She will attach to you. She will trust you. And if you leave, if you repeat even one part of the past, I won't be able to fix that for her. Every word was a blade, not to punish, to warn. Ethan didn't flinch. "Then I won't leave." The silence stretched between them. Ava pulled on Clara's sleeve. "Can he come to pancakes?" Clara looked at her daughter, the girl who saw the world not through the past, but through possibility. Then she looked back at Ethan. "The diner is down the street," she said. "We walk. No invitation, no warmth, but no rejection." And that was more than he had a right to expect. They walked slowly. Ava insisted on holding both their hands, one small palm in each of theirs, swinging their arms and skipping over the cracks in the pavement. Sometimes Ethan looked at Clara, catching small things he hadn't seen in years. The slight freckles near her cheekbone, the way her hair curled slightly at the ends, the soft line of concentration when she listened to Ava talk. Inside the small diner, Ava ate pancakes with the seriousness of a scientist conducting important research. Syrup smeared her face, and Ethan instinctively reached out a napkin to wipe her chin. He stopped halfway, unsure if he had the right. Clara watched, then gave a small, almost invisible nod. It felt like permission. He wiped Ava's cheeks gently. Ava giggled and leaned into his hand, as if she had known him all her life. Something in Ethan's chest broke and healed all at once. It was overwhelming, painful, and beautiful. A feeling he had never allowed himself to feel. Love. Not romantic love, not remembrance, but the raw, unfiltered love of a father finally understanding what he had almost lost. He didn't think about the future with grand gestures. He didn't think about proposals or meetings or declarations. He thought about tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. Because healing, he realized, wouldn't happen in a moment. It had to be earned. Slowly, patiently, over and over again. And he was ready for the long road ahead. The struggle for redemption. Ethan is determined to earn his place. Do you think consistency and patience will be enough to heal Clara's old wounds? Leave your comments and join us for the next stage of their journey. Weaving trust. Small moments. Big changes. He didn't become a father in a day. He became one in the quiet, ordinary moments that slowly layered on top of one another, like pages forming a book. It started with showing up. Every morning he would text Clara, not with demands or expectations, but with the simple question, "Can I see her today?" And sometimes the answer was yes, and sometimes it was no. And he accepted both without argument. He learned that being present meant allowing the other person to choose your presence. It was a kind of humility he had never known before. On Saturdays, he would meet Clara and Ava at the park. At first, he stood rigidly by the slide, unsure where to put his hands or how to talk to a 3-year-old who didn't know him yet. But Ava made it easy, in that carefree way only children possess. She grabbed his hand and dragged him toward the swings. She handed him leaves as if they were jewels and expected him to admire them, and he did. She climbed, jumped, and laughed with her whole body, and he learned to laugh with his. She had no memory of the years he had missed. She held no resentment. She only saw someone who smiled back, who listened, who cared. And that innocence healed and broke him a little more each day. Clara watched. She didn't interfere. She didn't rush. She didn't soften. The trust between them was not rebuilt with words, but with consistency. She watched him tie Ava's shoes when they came undone, fumbling the knot the first few times, and laughing at himself when Ava corrected him. She watched him carry her when she was tired, never moving with impatience. She watched his eyes soften when Ava looked at him. It wasn't the softness of guilt. It was the softness of love. There were moments when the past knocked on the door between them, uninvited. One afternoon, rain lashed against the windows of Clara's apartment, and Ava was coloring on the floor while the 2 adults sat nearby, drinking tea. The room was silent, except for the sound of Ava humming. Ethan looked at his hands, loosely wrapped around the warm mug, and said, "I was scared. Back then. I thought love was something that could break me." He didn't look up when he said it, as if the words themselves were heavy enough. Clara didn't interrupt him. She didn't let it slide either. "Fear doesn't excuse what you did," she said softly. "I know." His voice was low, firm. "I don't say it to erase anything. I say it so you understand that I know why I lost you. And I know I deserve nothing from you now. Not forgiveness, not another chance. I know, but I want to try to deserve to be in her life, even if that's all I ever get." The rain kept falling. Ava looked up then, her cheeks flushed with concentration. She crawled onto his lap, snuggling against his chest as if she had belonged there all her life. Ethan froze, not because he didn't want it, but because the moment felt too sacred to disturb. His hand rose slowly, gently, to rest on her back. Clara looked at them, and something inside her shifted. Not forgiveness, not resolution, but a release. The realization that her heart no longer trembled at the memory of leaving him. The past was still there, but it no longer owned her. As weeks turned into months, their lives began to form a rhythm. Ethan joined them at the library, helping Ava choose picture books, and reading them aloud in a voice that warmed the room. They walked along the riverbank, where Ava liked to skip pebbles across the water and declare she was making ripples in the future. They ate simple dinners at Clara's kitchen table, where everything was small, imperfect, and real. Ava began to seek his hand without invitation. She began to draw him into her crayon worlds, stick-figure drawings holding hands under bright yellow suns. She said "Mommy," as she always had, and one evening, as Ethan tucked her blanket around her after a long day, she whispered sleepily, "Daddy," as if the word had always belonged to him. His breath hitched. He didn't correct her. He didn't look to see if Clara had heard. He simply sat there, head bowed, and let the word settle into him like light entering a dark room. And Clara, standing in the doorway, did not stop the word. She did not freeze. She did not flinch. She simply watched, in silence, as Ava nestled deeper into sleep, and Ethan buried his face in his hands. Because love, she realized then, was not something you chased, or forced, or withheld out of fear. It was something you earned, and he was earning it, day by day, moment by moment. Not for her, for his daughter. And maybe, just maybe, one day for her too. Profound reflection. The word daddy. The final test. Between promise and power. Time softened the sharp edges between them, not erasing what had happened, but layering new memories over the old ones. But there were still days when the past rose up like a wall between them. Days when Ethan hesitated before knocking on Clara's door, when Clara looked away too quickly, when the silence stretched too long. Healing is never linear. It moves in circles and spirals, not straight lines. And one evening, that truth became apparent. Ethan had taken Ava to the botanical gardens outside of town. It had become their custom on Thursdays, when Clara worked late. Ava loved the place not for the flowers, but for the koi fish pond. She believed the fish understood her, and Ethan, for reasons he could never explain, believed her too. They stayed until the sky turned amber and gold, until the air grew cool and Ava fell asleep in his arms. When they returned to Clara's apartment, it was a quiet, gentle transition. Shoes by the door, coat hung up. Ava tucked into bed with her favorite stuffed rabbit. But when Ethan returned to the kitchen, Clara looked different. She wasn't angry. She wasn't cold. She held a small envelope, a letter that had been slipped under her door while they were out. He saw his own company's logo cleanly stamped in the corner. And suddenly, the room felt smaller. "What is that? Who is that?" he asked, though he already knew. "Your assistant delivered it," Clara replied, placing the letter on the table. Her tone was controlled, but he could hear the tremor underneath. Fear, disappointment, something harder to name. "They want me to meet with your legal team, to discuss custody." The words hit him like a stone. It was so sudden he felt physically breathless. "I didn't send that," he said immediately, moving closer. His voice was rough. "Clara, I swear to you, I would never—" She didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse. She didn't break down. She simply looked at him as she had done the day she walked out of his life. Clear-eyed, firm, unwilling to break for him again. "Ethan," she said, quiet but unbroken, "I cannot let them hurt her. I cannot let them use her. I cannot let promises be temporary again." His hands clenched into fists, not in anger at her, but at himself, at the version of himself who would have done exactly this 3 years ago, without hesitation, without thought, without remorse. The version who had been when he told her someone else was better, when he believed power was protection and love was weakness. "That's not who I am now," he said. But the words felt unfamiliar in his own mouth because he feared they weren't true enough. Not yet. Clara didn't look away, Then prove it. The silence between them was long and heavy. In the next room, Ava's soft breathing was the only sound. Ethan sat slowly at the table, elbows on his knees, head bowed. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then he looked up. "I will fire every lawyer involved," he said. "I will cancel all documents. I will put it in writing that I will never seek custody unless you choose it. I will legally bind myself to the promise I am making you now. I will never take her from you." Clara's breath hitched, not because she doubted him, but because she knew the weight of what he was offering. A man like Ethan didn't surrender control lightly. He was offering vulnerability. He was offering the opposite of power. "Why?" she asked, so softly he almost missed it, and his answer came without hesitation. "Because I don't want to win," he said. "I want to stay." The room felt different after that, as if something that had been frozen had finally begun to thaw. Clara sat slowly across from him, not close enough to touch, but close enough to see him clearly. "You hurt me," she said. "You broke me in ways you didn't see." "I know," he replied, his voice firm and low. "I am not asking you to forget. I am asking you to allow me to try to be someone she can be proud of. Someone you don't have to protect her from." Clara didn't speak right away. She looked at her hands folded on the table, thin fingers interlaced, pale in the warm kitchen light. And when she spoke, her voice was softer than before, but not weaker. "You are becoming that," she said. It was not forgiveness. It was not a promise. It was recognition. And that mattered more. Ethan exhaled, not with relief, but with the recognition of how far there still was to go, and how deeply he wanted to walk every step of that distance. They sat together in silence. Not the old silence of distance, but a new silence, one that had room for both of them to exist without building walls. In the next room, Ava dreamed. They stayed at the table until late into the night, and for the first time since the day they broke up, the future felt possible. Act of love and power. Ethan's move to legally surrender control is a supreme act of vulnerability. Do you think this unwavering commitment will be the key to Clara finally trusting him completely? Share your reflections on this turning point. Fate. The healing connection. This time, he stays. Final. The seasons changed, though neither of them could say exactly when the shift began. Perhaps it was the day Ava climbed onto Ethan's shoulders at the park and trusted him without hesitation. Maybe it was the night Clara came home exhausted from work and found Ethan already in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, stirring pasta sauce, while Ava danced to music crackling softly on the radio. Or maybe the true turning point came in moments so small they were almost invisible. The shared glances that no longer held hesitation, the comfortable silences that didn't feel empty, the laughter that slowly returned, like sunlight warming frozen ground. Ava grew more secure with Ethan in her life. She learned to ride a small bike with training wheels, and every time she fell, Ethan would kneel beside her and wait, not lifting her immediately, but letting her decide when she was ready to get up. Clara watched from a distance sometimes, hands tucked into her coat pockets, realizing this was not the same man who had left years ago. Life had sculpted him into someone gentler, someone grounded. The sharpness that once lived in him had softened into depth, but the real test came quietly. One snowy evening in early winter, Ava came down with a fever. It struck fast, unexpectedly. Her small body shook with chills, and her cheeks grew too flushed. Clara held her, whispering calming nonsense, while fear pressed against her ribs. Ava's breathing was too fast. Clara fumbled with her coat, trying to wrap Ava in blankets, trying to think, trying not to panic. Ethan arrived not because she called, but because he was already on his way. He knocked once, came in, and saw everything in an instant. There was no hesitation. He crossed the room and took Ava gently into his arms. His voice was calm, low, firm, the voice of someone who had learned to anchor himself for the sake of another person. "We'll take her to the clinic," he said. "I'll drive." Clara didn't argue. Not this time. Not about control. Not about trust. She simply followed. In the car, Ava lay in Ethan's lap, while Clara drove. The roles reversed without discussion because instinct guided them now, not pride. Ethan whispered softly to Ava, his fingers brushing her damp hair away from her forehead. "I've got you," he whispered. "You're okay. I'm right here." Something in those words brought tears to Clara's eyes before she could stop them. She kept her gaze fixed on the road, but the world blurred. For the first time, she understood, fully and deeply, that he wasn't going anywhere. At the clinic, the fever broke after treatment. They waited in a small room while Ava slept curled against Ethan's chest, his arms protective and tender around her. Clara sat beside them, her hand resting on Ava's foot, the three of them forming a circle of warmth in a cold world. It was then, as silence filled the room, as their daughter slept peacefully, as the past and present lay side by side, that Ethan looked up at Clara. "She saved me," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Not just now. Those 3 years, I didn't know it then, but I was breaking. She made me human again." Clara looked at him, exhaustion and emotion mixing into something raw. "You had to choose to change," she replied. "No one could do that for you." "I chose," he said. There was no doubt in his voice. The silence between them shifted. Not heavy now. Full. Clara leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. "I don't know what happens next," she admitted. "I do," Ethan said, and there was no urgency in his voice, no pressure, no demand, only truth. "What happens next is whatever you choose. I'll follow your lead. I won't rush your heart. I won't ask for what I haven't earned." Clara closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in the fragile tenderness of the moment. When she opened them again, she didn't speak. She simply moved her hand toward him, slow and cautious, placing it gently over his, where it rested on Ava's back. It was not a response. It was a beginning. Weeks turned into months. Winter melted into spring. They built something new. Not a recreation of what had been broken, but something firmer, based on respect, honesty, and shared love for their daughter. One evening, they were standing on the small balcony of Clara's apartment. The sun had just set, and the air was cool. Ava was inside, asleep, her stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm, as always. The town was quiet in that soft way small towns are at nightfall. Ethan turned to Clara. "I love you," he said. Not as a plea, not as a question, but as a truth spoken softly and without fear. Clara didn't look away this time. "I love you too," she replied, not as a surrender, but as an acceptance. No grand announcements, no dramatic gestures, just two people choosing each other. Slowly, steadily, and fully. Ava would grow up knowing she was wanted, loved, and protected, and Clara would never carry the weight of love alone again. This time he stayed. This time, they built the future together. End of the moving story. Final reflection and call to action. Closing. The story of Ethan and Clara teaches us that regret only holds value when it turns into action. Ethan didn't just apologize, he dismantled his life of power to build a foundation of humility and consistency. What is harder to forgive? Ethan's cruel words at the beginning, or the 3 years of silence? This story of love, parenthood, and redemption proves that second chances are possible, but they must be earned with every day of effort. If you were moved by Ethan's path to fatherhood and healing, and Clara's strength to set boundaries,